Good evening, families, friends, and returning UNE students. We are so excited that you have chosen to join us this evening as we spend some time talking about our return to UNE plan. My name is Jen DeBurrow, and I am the Dean of Students and Assistant Provost for Student Affairs. I'm joined this evening by some truly wonderful colleagues, each of whom will share with you some bit of the plan that they helped us to write, and then we'll have some time at the end for question and answer. Now, I encourage you to hover down at the bottom of your screen, and what you'll see there is a Q&A button. Feel free to click on that. A text box will open and you can share your question with us in that space. Now, I won't be answering each of those by typing in. Over the course of this, what we'll do is we'll take some time at the conclusion of the brief presentation and we'll answer those questions for you then. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first panelist this evening, our university president, Dr. James Herbert. Dr. Herbert.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. And I wish that, well, first of all, I wish we could all be together and talking in person rather than over Zoom. But such as that, I'm glad at least we're able to connect in this way. Let me begin by saying that I really miss the students. As you all know, my wife Lynn and I live right here on campus, and we spend a lot of time doing things on campus. And I have to tell you, ever since March, whenever the students went home, it has been really kind of creepy around here. It seemed very strange and empty. And I'm really, really looking forward. Our first group of students comes back to campus this weekend, and then more coming next week. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing students and back on campus and bringing things back to life. I miss you guys a lot. It's been a challenging time for all of us with the pandemic. There's no question about that. I want to begin by thanking our students for their resilience and their nimbleness in making the transition to remote learning back in the spring. That was a quick transition. It was a big lift for you guys to do, and you did it really well and with grace and dignity and poise and resilience, and I'm very proud of all of you. I'm also very proud of our professional staff and our faculty for making that transition as well. It was a big lift for them to move their teaching entirely online, and they really stepped up to the plate and did that without complaint. Back in May, we made the decision to resume on-campus operations in the summer for our graduate health profession students, and in the fall for all of our students, including our undergraduates. And we did that first and foremost because our UNE model of education is inherently based on a hands-on, on-campus, face-to-face experience, complemented by remote and online work. But our model of education is not designed to be done over Zoom. And to get the full experience of UNE, we need people to be here. Now, we would not have made that decision if I didn't have a level of confidence that we would be able to pull it off safely. And so we were looking at a lot of factors. We didn't know all the answers of how we were going to be able to do it. But once we were confident, and once I ultimately was confident that we would be able to do it, we made the decision to plant a flag and to say we're going to be open in May. And we have been working tirelessly, and I mean tirelessly, since that time, actually preceding that, since April, to plan for our reopening. And what you see on the UNE Onward website is a reflection of all of that work. Although I'll tell you that really there's behind every one of those themes, there's a lot of additional work that goes on behind the scenes that you may not even be aware of. We have consulted with our own experts in-house, so our physicians, our doctors, our infectious disease scientists, our engineers. We've also consulted with various state and regional and national entities like the CDC, and we've been monitoring best practices. And a number of us are in good positions to do that. So for example, I was on the panel that worked with the UMaine system together in partnership to craft reopening documents for the governor for the entire state. And so we're very much in tune with emerging best practices across the country and more regionally. What I can tell you is that we are very, very fortunate to be in Maine, one of the two states with the lowest incidence of the virus and lowest level of community transmission in the entire nation. So we're in a very, very safe location, relatively speaking. And I don't want to minimize and say that there's zero risk. I mean, there's not zero risk right now anywhere with this pandemic, but you couldn't be in a safer place relative to everywhere else in the country. And secondly, we have worked very, very hard to make the campus as safe as possible. And we've engaged in all kinds of engineering feats that you're going to hear about tonight. We have put in place all kinds of behavioral protocols. And I am convinced that the campus is as safe as any campus could be in this entire nation, if you take into account both the things that we've done locally and where we're located. Now, we can't completely eliminate the risk of the virus. I wish I could say we could, and we could somehow create a bubble around UNE that would provide 100% protection to all of us. And alas, that's just not possible. But we have done everything that we can do to make it as safe as possible. And what it now boils down to, quite frankly, is the community, and primarily that's you, the students, in following the rules and following the UNE promise. And if we all stick to that promise, and I want to highlight the 4 key parts of that promise, and if we all stick to that, then we're going to be fine. And we're going to have minimal, if any, viral transmission on campus. And we'll be able to stay open and have a wonderful fall semester. But that's going to require that we all wear our masks, and we wear them religiously. Okay? So you have to be wearing your mask at all times. It's going to require that we stay 6 feet away from each other. So we do the social distancing thing. The only exceptions being under enhanced PPE and faculty supervision to be doing certain kinds of activities. But beyond that, we got to keep our social distance. We got to wear our masks. We got to wash our hands, okay? Regularly and thoroughly wash our hands. Good hand hygiene is very important. And then we have to monitor our symptoms. And if we have the sniffles, if we have any respiratory symptoms at all, we got to go to the health center and get them checked out. And if we do those things, combined with everything else that the faculty and professional staff have done, we're going to be fine, and we're going to be able to remain open, and we're all going to have a great time. But if we don't do those things, meaning if we go take off our masks and go have a party somewhere, then we could have trouble. And so what you can expect is all of us, the faculty, administrators, professional staff, are going to be helping you all remember to follow those rules. And what I really need, and I'm asking you as a plea, I'm pleading with you personally, is I need you all as student leaders to help police yourself and to reinforce and to create a culture so that we're all adhering to those guidelines. And if we do that, we're going to be fine. So what I'd like to conclude by is saying that, again, I really miss seeing you guys. It's been a rough spring and summer, and I can't wait for the fall in just a couple of weeks to welcome you all back to campus and to see you all again, even though I'll be wearing a mask, but you can still spot me. So look forward to it. And Jen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, President Herbert. So I'd like to spend a few moments actually talking to you about the pieces of the plan that I helped with the development of. The first of those actually is the UNE Promise. And so the UNE Promise is something that we are asking all of our community members to commit to. And so what that promise entails, and you can see it right now on the screen, are things like, as Dr. Herbert just mentioned, keeping social distance, wearing your face masks, prompt washing of hands, following directional signs, all of those things that we know if we follow will help to keep our community safe. So one of the things that we'll be asking all of our residential students to do and our faculty and staff to do is to signal their commitment to this promise. So we're asking folks to print that off, to sign it, and to display it so that we can all signal for each other that we've made this commitment to keeping our community safe. Now, let's talk a little bit about what you can expect from the moment you return to campus. So we are asking our families, our students actually, to show up with their negative test results. Hopefully you've all had the opportunity to review the Onward plan, and if you have not, we invite all of you to go to our website, to click on the link for the COVID plan, and you will find our Onward plan, which details all of this information. In there, you see that we're asking our students to come with a negative test result. So all undergraduate students, residential and commuter, will need to do this. They will produce that on the day that they arrive. They will sign an attestation, which outlines all of the policies that Dr. Herbert mentioned we've put into place. So things like guests in residence halls, leaving the state, all of those very important factors that will help us to keep one another safe. And then students will actually take another test at that time. Once they're done, they get their branded UNE mask, they'll get their thermometer, they'll get some directional things from us, and then they'll head to their residence halls to get moved in. On Saturday, August 22nd, we'll be inviting all of our commuting students to come to campus to go through that same process. So bringing their negative test result, signing their attestation, taking their test, and then similarly, they'll get a little bag of goodies from us that will hopefully be used in these weeks and days, months ahead. We are asking at this time that all of our students be prepared with a plan. So in the event that a student does get sick, or maybe they're the contact of someone who has been sick, we're asking all of you to be prepared with a plan to get home. Now, a note on this. We have reserved space for quarantine on campus, but that space will be limited, and we really want students to be able to return home to their families where they can receive that really personal care. I don't know about all of you, but my dad made some pretty amazing chicken soup that had truly restorative properties. And that's what I would have wanted to have if I were not well. So hopefully you will be able to get your students safely back home. And for those who can't, maybe because they need a plane to get home, or there's someone at home who has a compromised immune system and for whom we would be nervous about them returning, we have maintained space on campus for those students. So now moving on, let's talk a little bit about moving the UNE Promise into the residence halls. So health and safety is obviously tantamount to our being able to remain in person this fall. And so we've done a number of things. Hopefully most of you are aware that we reduced density in our first year area. And so there are no triples in that area, only doubles this fall. And so we've worked very hard to do that, again, with health and safety at the front of our minds. We've also implemented a number of new policies. And so unlike years past, when guests could come into the buildings, we could have overnight guests who are not UNE students. This fall, we will not be doing that. And that's in order to just maintain as best we can the boundary on these spaces that we need in order to have health and safety primary. So no guests after move-in day. And speaking of move-in day, a reminder, if you're not aware, students are to bring one family or friend with them to campus to help. And hopefully many of you have already taken advantage of the opportunity you had to drop items off in advance. Having done that, we further reduce the density of people on campus on move-in day. We are also discouraging travel outside of the state of Maine. We are fortunate that the state of Maine has remained low with positive cases, and we recognize that transit out of the state into other states is where we could have some struggle. And so we are encouraging students, we're not mandating it because we know some will have to get home, but we are encouraging our students not to travel outside of the state of Maine. And if they do, they need to honor the state's guidelines. So they need to come back and either test or quarantine for 14 days. The last thing I'd like to discuss with you this evening, and I already mentioned quarantine, so I won't go back to that. The last thing that I'd like to talk about is community life. Our students will come back and they want to remain engaged and they want the opportunity to be connected with one another. And so our teams are working really hard to make sure that students have both virtual and in-person social opportunities. We'll be doing lots of things like make and take. So students will have an opportunity to stop by our office, grab a little bag for a paint night as an example, and then with their friends, they can go back to a room and take the instruction on how to create that painting. So lots of creative things that we'll be doing. Couch concerts as another example. So lots of things to keep our students engaged. We're also working very hard to make sure that all of the services that help our students to be most well also remain in place. And so the gym, which is a really important aspect of the student experience, will remain open. Now this year, our students will make an appointment to use that space, but that's what will allow us to keep it open and to keep it sanitized as we need to be able to. Students will also have the opportunity to take things like yoga or spin classes outside. So we're making sure that we're providing these opportunities, but doing it in a modality that allows us to keep people safe. And finally, all of the resources that our students typically have available to them, so whether that's tutoring, career services, the counseling center, these all remain functional for students. In some cases, we may do more online, but all of those services remain available. And we recognize that it's important for us to do that because this is part of that face-to-face experience that's so crucial to the UNE experience. So I have seen a number of questions come in that I know we'll be able to answer for you at the end. Just a reminder, I'm not going to type those answers in right now. We'll do that shortly when we're through with all these presentations. What I'd like to do at this point is introduce Alan Tebow, our Vice President for University Operations. Vice President Tebow.
You're muted, Al. You're muted.
Sorry about that. You'd think after all the Zoom meetings I've been in, I would have remembered to do that. Welcome. It's been a long time since you guys left back in March, and it has been lonely here. My team of the Department of Campus Services has been here every day, preparing the campus for your return this fall. We were fortunate enough at the beginning of the pandemic, actually before, to have purchased a electrostatic sanitation system that we were using in the locker room facilities across across this campus. We were able to train everybody on that and get that up and running. It's based on a hazardous-free chemical, or actually it's a mineral, it's not a chemical. It's rated 0 for health, flammability, and physical hazards. It's EPA registered as a disinfectant, broad-spectrum disinfectant, and it instantly kills viruses and bacteria on contact. It also remains active for up to 10 hours. In this system that we use, we can literally go through a classroom, as you see on the screen, mist all the furniture, the surfaces in about 5 minutes. And it stays active, as I said, for 10 days. So we have ramped up and purchased a dozen of these units to be used on the campus. After you left, we went through all of the residence halls, every single room, every single classroom, and did a full deep sanitation of all the spaces on campus. And we feel that we've got a germ-free, as germ-free can be, campus at this current time. We have enhanced sanitation protocols that we've put in place. So all restrooms will be cleaned 2 or 3 times a day so that we can make sure that they're as clean as possible. During those times, we're going to ask that the restrooms be isolated so that they don't, occupants don't use the facilities while we're cleaning them. We have sanitation stations that we've put in all of the classrooms. So essentially it's a wipe, a disinfecting wipe. So when you sit down at your table or your location, you can wipe your area to make sure that it's sanitized for you when you sit there. Again, that is a broad spectrum disinfectant with a very rapid dwell time, so that by the time it evaporates, it's essentially cleaned all of the surfaces that you've wiped. We have hand sanitization stations all across the campus. I don't think you can go anywhere and not see at least 1 or 2 of them. When you look down hallways, they're in classrooms, they're in laboratories, they're outside of stairwell doors. So anytime you have a high touch area, you're going to see a hand sanitation station. And those are alcohol-based as recommended by the CDC. So we've got those up and running. I think we have over 800 on the campus. We've gone through with our team and we've trained them on all of the disinfectants and proper care and use of those, so we are ready to employ those as we come back. We've gone through classrooms, as I indicated, and we have provided social distancing in the classrooms, so 6 feet between classrooms and laboratories, dining areas, seating areas. The furniture, the academic buildings, put it in storage in order to maintain social distancing. You see in the picture, we have located the chairs with a green dot that indicates an acceptable location to sit. If you put the chair outside of the table, you're too close to the other person, so you violate floors with red tape, so we know where the tables are supposed to be, so we can make sure that every day the furniture is reset, in the proper location to confirm social distance. You'll see the dining room, reduce the density there so that you'll be able to without your mask on and not your neighbors. All shared offices, we're looking at minimizing spaces in shared offices, and all across campus, we're putting something in the office rooms so that we can minimize the density as well. We're putting up plexiglass in a lot of high transaction areas, so that if you have to go to the counter at the library to check out materials, there's a plexiglass area between you and the checkout person, and enhance the safety and security of all the people on campus. Our mechanical systems, we have gone through every single building. We have opened up our outside air dampers to maximize the air coming into the buildings. And conversely, we've expanded the exhaust rates and opened up the dampers, taken away timers so that they're running continuously all across campus to help purge the buildings every single day. And we've gone through all the filtration systems on all these ventilation systems to ensure that we've got the highest.
I'm sorry, it sounds like we're having some technical difficulties with Vice President Tebow. Vice President Tebow has some really amazing information to share, most of which is actually in our Onward plan. So we would ask actually that you review that, but then also share some of those questions with us, and we will try and get to them. But as you hear, we're having some really bad static, and you're not able to get the full essence of what it is that he's trying to share. I do apologize for that. What I'd like to do next actually is introduce our two college deans, Dr. Karen Pardue and Dr. Jonathan Millen. Both will talk to you a little bit about the academic nature of the Onward plan. And again, we'll take some questions once these presentations are done.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Karen Pardue, and I'm the Dean of the Westbrook College of Health Professions. I am delighted to be here with you at the University of New England. Could I have the first slide, please? Many of our health profession programs are year-round, and many of you may know that the Westbrook College of Health Professions stretches across both campuses. We have programs on our Portland campus as well as our Biddeford campus. In May, 6 of our programs welcomed new students as well as to join the continuing students in those majors or programs. And that included nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, nurse anesthesia, physician assistant, and those are all in Portland, and then athletic training down in Biddeford. While the majority of our coursework was online, the second week in June, we began to resume labs and clinical simulations. The faculty and the students were eager and excited to be back on campus because in health profession education, we can't train students without the opportunity for hands-on learning. And this summer, we had abundant hands-on experiential learning. Could I have the next slide? When we reopened our labs and clinical simulation, we realized, obviously, we cannot maintain the social distancing that you've been hearing about. Our work necessitates close contact between our students when they're partners with each other in the lab, when they're working with patients. And so in order to do this safely, we needed to adapt many of our prior policies. Each and every clinical laboratory activity was assessed for the appropriate level of personal protective equipment. And PPE can take many forms. We have masks, gloves, cloth overlays, as you see in the slide on the left, face shields, all the way up to N95 respirators. And as I said, we employed appropriate PPE for the type of activity that the faculty and the students were engaged in. We additionally instituted a cohort model, and you will hear more about that when you return to school this fall. The cohorts were used for all laboratory and simulation work, and they represent small, stable groups of students who work together throughout the semester. To the students, you may be more familiar with us mixing you up a little bit because we like you to feel different body types and examine each other. But with a cohort model, once we establish a group of students, we keep it that way. And that allows us to have well-defined, easy to trace groups of people should any illness arise. Our summer term is ending tomorrow, Friday, and with the strong adherence to the UNE promise and everybody's dedication to PPE, we have not had one incident of community transmission amongst any of our students and faculty across our 6 programs. This demonstrates to me that our approach to education with our return to campus-based learning is effective and it's working. I've been talking with students this week, and they're actually sad to see the summer term ending, and they're excited that the work will resume on the fall semester on Wednesday, August 26th. So during the question and answer time, I'll be happy to answer any questions about our summer experience. And I'm now pleased to introduce my colleague, Dr. Jonathan Millen, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all tonight, even though I really can't see you. I know that you're out there. It's a pleasure to chat with you. And it was said earlier, it would be so much nicer if we could do this in person. And so I also want to tell you how much I look forward to seeing you all on campus in a very short period of time. In the College of Arts and Sciences, we have been planning as well. We have the benefit of my dean colleagues, Dean Pardue and others, and watching what they've been doing all summer. And we've been using that information as we prepared to bring our undergraduates and graduates in the College of Arts and Sciences back in a few weeks. We also are taking everything that we learned from the spring as we were forced unexpectedly to begin a full program of remote learning and teaching. We learned a lot, and we've spent most of the summer learning how to balance the best of distant learning modalities with what we've always done so well on campus to bring together the plan that you will read about in UNE Onward. And I really do hope that you'll take the time to read through that, as you'll get a lot of what to expect from your classroom and your laboratory experience. But I would like to tell you just a little bit about that now, and then of course be available for questions afterwards. What we're going to be implementing for the fall is a hybrid model of learning. And the hybrid model is going to be based on a balance of remote as well as face-to-face in the classroom and in the lab traditional learning. The synchronous in-class piece will be very much what you're used to in your classrooms, although as was mentioned, you'll be in smaller groups. So essentially, we're going to be reducing each classroom by 1/2 of the occupancy to make sure that we can practice social distancing in the classroom as well as everywhere else on campus. So we're going to be taking the curriculum essentially and dividing it into 2 pieces for every course. About 50% of the work will be done in the classroom, face-to-face, in a traditional modality, and then the other half will be done online. And in terms of online, mostly using Zoom and also using Blackboard. And these are 2 modalities that the faculty have been working with all summer, and many have used them in the past as well. To make this work, we've also adjusted the schedule throughout the week so that all of our classes will be broken up into 2 meetings per week, each of 80 minutes, so that with a cohort model, as Dean Pardue was describing, imagine that you had a class of 30. We're going to take 2 cohorts, cohort A and cohort B, and presuming that that class was meeting on, let's say, a Monday, Wednesday calendar, 15 students would meet in class on Monday. The other students would meet in class on Wednesday, and that curriculum will be the same for both cohorts. And then when they're not in the classroom, they will be working on the online portion of the course. So the experience of students in both cohort A and cohort B will be identical. And by bringing this together, we will be able to maintain the engaged and active learning practices that make UNE the education that it is. And as I said at the beginning, really bringing together the best of what we learned from remote learning and balancing that with what makes CAS so special with the in the classroom in-person instruction. So with that, I look forward to the rest of this conversation. And as mentioned, if you have any questions that I can answer, I'll be glad to do so later in this program.
Thank you, Dean Millen. So this is our opportunity now to address some of the questions that have come up in our chat. Let's start off with a question about testing. There are lots of questions here about testing and the 72-hour rule. A note on this, we are sticking with that 72-hour rule, and we understand that in some communities, there is a wait, there's a lag time between when you take the test and when you get your result. I invite all of you to visit the FAQs page on the Onward website. What we've included in there is not only, and some of you have asked this question as well, there's a resource in there that will help you to identify testing sites in your community, but there's also a link to a resource in there that provides an at-home test kit. You can order that test kit in advance. They will send it to you. You will take the test, send it back, and within 2 to 3 days, the company will return your result. So we do encourage our families to avail themselves of that. We find actually that some of our students have already used it, and it is particularly helpful. What is unique about this particular company is that they have the opportunity to share that they live in a congregate living facility. And that's what makes this particular website the one that we really want to direct people to. So another question that we've gotten much of about testing is whether or not families need to be tested in order to drop their student off on move-in day. We are asking that our families abide by the state of Maine's regulations. So families either need to have been quarantined for 14 days or tested before entering the state. Those living in New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, as you know, if you've read that plan, don't need to do that. Now, we won't be asking our families to provide evidence of that, but we do ask that you abide by the state of Maine's guidance. President Herbert, can you talk to us a little bit about tuition? I've got a lot of questions in here about whether or not students will see any kind of reduction because they'll be partially online or because we will be sending residential students home at the Thanksgiving break.
So a good question. No, we're not discounting tuition. So what I would remind everyone of is that we're continuing our educational program as it always has been. The hybrid model is not something lesser than you would get. I mean, it's a great model. You're going to be getting the face-to-face component, and then you're going to be getting supplemental material online. So no, we're not discounting tuition. What I would say is that we've held our tuition flat, which most institutions have not done. I just got some data today, in fact. We did a little research looking at some of our competitor institutions and our peer institutions. Most of them have raised their tuition. Some raised their tuition in the double digits this year. So one of our competitor institutions raised tuition 11 point something percent, and then also raised fees close to 5% as well. There's a number of institutions that have raised tuition beyond 5%. Our Board of Trustees, shortly before the pandemic, authorized a 2.75% increase in tuition for this coming academic year. We, knowing the impact that the pandemic has had on all of our families, we elected to, even though that was approved, and by the way, that would have been an increase that's less than the national average in tuition, but we elected to rescind that and to go out with flat tuition and not do an increase. This fixed costs continue to go up, but we absorbed those costs without passing them on to our families. So we're not doing a discount in our tuition, but we are keeping our tuition flat, and we have actually increased the amount of scholarship aid that we provide to students as well. So now, should we, God forbid, we don't want to have to even think about this, but of course we always think about every contingency. Should we have to do what we did in the spring and go back to remote instruction and send everybody home, then we'll do again what we did in the spring, which is we would discount the unused portion of room and board. But we would continue on with the remote teaching just like we did in the spring. Although it would be better than in the spring because of, as Dean Millen was saying, the lessons that we learned. So long story short, no, we will not be discounting tuition unless the way you look at it is the fact that we didn't increase tuition like the rest of our peers did, in some sense could be viewed as a discount. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you, President Herbert. Dean Millen, there are some questions about when students can expect to hear or learn a little bit more about the hybrid format that you spoke about. So if a student should expect that there are changes to their schedule, or that, I'm sorry, I'm trying to synthesize a few questions in here. So why don't you take that first part, actually. When could students expect to learn a little bit more about the hybrid format?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. So the faculty in CAS will be reaching out to their students. I've asked them to do so midweek next week. I've asked them to do it by the 19th. There may be some slight changes just based on continuing enrollments. The good news is we continue to have students express interest in UNE, and so there might be a classroom change to accommodate enrollments, but the classes themselves will be set. We're not looking at changes in time. As I said, because of the cohort model, what students will mostly be learning is whether or not they're on the Monday or the Wednesday or the Tuesday or the Thursday, but that won't be a change in schedule. And what we're going to ask is, if you're in the Monday meeting, that you still plan to meet on the Wednesday cohort at the same time to do the online work, so you maintain that kind of calendar. We call that synchronous learning. So even though you're not in the classroom, you're still maintaining the same daily schedule throughout the week. So there really shouldn't be any kind of impact to the daily schedule or the weekly schedule based on the cohort model.
Thank you, Dean Millen. Dean Pardue, if you could take us through sort of the next phase of that question, which is, what happens if a student does get sick? How will they be able to use this hybrid format to continue learning while they need to be in quarantine?
If a student should get sick and need to excuse themselves for quarantine for a period of time, the lessons that are all asynchronous will be fully available to them. The faculty are also prepared to reach out and do individual work with every student to keep them up to date. Some examples that I can give from this summer that we learned is, even though skill development over Zoom can be really challenging, there were times that when our students were in the gross anatomy lab, a student that was outside of the lab could watch what was happening in the lab when the faculty member used their phone and Zoom to beam out what was happening in the classroom while they were not there. So there are many different ways besides just having a student rely on our learning management system, Blackboard, to stay abreast with exactly what's happening in the courses, in the labs, or in the simulations during any time that they may need to step away.
Thank you, Dean Pardue. Vice President Tebow, I understand that the technical glitch on your end may be corrected now. Could you talk a little bit for us about what families can expect, what our students can expect from the preparations your team has done on facilities, please?
How does this sound to everybody? You getting static? Good. Sorry about that, everybody. We have spent an enormous amount of time and effort making sure that it's completely sanitized. We've employed electrostatic misting systems, had those in place.
Yeah, it's not working. Sorry.
Al, I'm just going to ask you to call in to the session over your phone if you want to take a break, and maybe Jen can pose another question.
Sorry about that, Al.
That is exactly what we'll do. So Vice President Tebow will call in so that we can hear his answer. In the meantime, some additional questions on testing have come through. So as a reminder, students do need to produce that negative test. We invite our families to use that resource that will actually send a test home to you. And as a reminder, we are not asking our families to show us proof of their own negative test. Okay, so just a reminder, lots and lots of times that question is coming through. So I just want to reiterate that for us. President Herbert, this is probably best answered by you. Can you talk a little bit about what the decision-making would look like that might require us to send students home again, either this fall or were that to happen in the spring? Can you just talk a little bit about that process?
Sure. So we've thought really deeply about this. And what we're doing is we have a team in place that meets every week that team meets. And what we do is we are monitoring, we have a dashboard, and we're monitoring all kinds of factors. And those include any positive cases we have, the number of contacts that we might have. And by the way, we're hoping we have 0 positive cases, but I'm just saying we have to expect that there may be some. So any positive cases, our best information from contact tracing about where those cases came from. So did they contract them off campus, or were they community transmitted within the campus? So that's something else we're looking at. We're looking at locally, what does the rate of transmission in the community here in Southern Maine look like? You know, what are those numbers and how are they trending? We're looking at the availability of beds that we have, both beds for any patients who are positive and can't return home. Jen, you mentioned, for example, that most people, if you have a positive test, would return home. But let's say we have a student from California or Colorado or Texas or whatever, they certainly can't get on a plane with a positive test. And so we would house them in our special area that we've created for COVID positive patients. The number of students we will be doing contact tracing, and the number of students who are in quarantine due to contact tracing, for example, testing capacity. So we're going to be looking at all of these factors and then linking them to various decision points. So it may be before we would just declare, okay, look, we have to close down and send everybody back home to go to remote learning. We might do things like double down on our enforcement of social distancing. So for example, the approach we're going to be taking to begin with is one of education and teamwork, and that we're all going to be helping each other maintain the rules, maintain the masking and the social distancing. But I could imagine a situation if things started to escalate that we would have to move to a more enforcement-based model, that if somebody wasn't doing it, that there were consequences for them. They had to go into isolation, and if they didn't comply with that, then we would have to send them home or even suspend them. So there are triggers we could pull, steps we could take prior to actually having to go fully remote again. And based on our experience, as Dean Pardue said, this summer with our students, it went really, really well. We had 0 transmission this summer, and people did comply. If people would forget and they wouldn't have their mask on, or they got too close and we would, gently remind them, they would comply. And so we're optimistic actually that this can work, but we're not naive. And we are going to be monitoring all of those factors on a regular basis. And I meet with that team, and we all meet together. And right now, we only meet once a week, although I'm in contact individually with subgroups literally daily. But what we will do is, should these indicators, these markers start looking problematic, is we will resume meeting every single day. So that pandemic response committee will be meeting every single day if needed, to continuously be evaluating all of these things and then make any decisions that we have to make about what to do next.
Thank you, President Herbert. Sorry for that quick delay there, folks, having a little technical difficulty of my own. We've got a number of questions about the hotel, so I can answer some of those. And then if we are able to invite Vice President Thibault to offer some words on the shuttle, hopefully he can help us with that. There are a number of questions both about what students know about the hotel at this point in time. So I would back up briefly and just remind that we had to reduce density in our first year area. And that did mean, in fact, that we needed to move some students off campus. Lots of folks are asking questions about that decision, and I would remind everyone that by keeping our students together in the hotel, the university can maintain service for them that they wouldn't necessarily have if they were in houses off campus. So we will go in and we will be able to clean those rooms weekly. We will take the sheets and launder them for the students. And it also allows us to ensure programs. So we will have RAs in the building, and we will have an area coordinator who will be connected to the space. space so that we can be responsive to students, either if there are social issues that should arise between them and their peers, or they require resource, or maybe they're sick. By being in the hotel, we're able to respond to that in a manner very similar to the way that we would manage that on campus. We also maintain fear about sending many students off campus so late in the summer when the number of rentals is actually lower. And so we didn't want to create problems for our families either. So that decision was made with student safety and well-being in mind. Now, Vice President Tebow, if you are able to join us at this point in time, there are some questions about what transportation to and from the hotel will look like. And I know that your team has been working on the shuttle or a lift option. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
You're muted.
Okay, there we go. I got the mute.
Thank you.
All right. So the bus service that we're looking at a bus service to get students to and from the hotels. We have set it up so it would make hourly round trips. So we would start early in the morning to get people here for 7 a.m. on campus. And the last trip on the Monday through Friday would get them back to the hotel around 11. Saturday, Sunday would start a little bit later, get on campus by 8 a.m. and have it get them back last round for midnight.
Thank you. And since we can hear you, perhaps you could take this moment now just to speak a little bit about what your team has been doing to prepare our facilities, please.
Certainly. I apologize for the static. We have spent all the time since you left in March preparing the campus for your return. We were fortunate enough early in the year to actually buy an electrostatic sanitation system that we employed in our locker rooms in the forum in the campus center. And we were lucky to have that when the pandemic hit. So first thing we did was trained all our staff on how to use it, and then bought 12 more of the units. So we have them all across both campuses so that we're ready to go to sanitize all of the buildings on a regular basis. We've employed a high sanitation level. We went through every single dorm room, every single classroom, and did a full sanitation. This product is a EPA registered disinfectant. It is electrostatically charged, so it clings to surfaces, so it finds its way to the underside of the tables and the undersides of the chairs, and it kills viruses and bacteria on contact. It lasts for 10 days once it's applied. So even though we're going through every single day, when it gets wiped off of the surfaces with your sleeves, it'll be reapplied every single night, and it'll keep the campus as germ-free as possible. We've installed sanitation stations in all the classrooms so that there's a disinfectant wipe that you can use to wipe off your surface prior to using it. And we have put hand sanitizers all across campus. We've flooded it. I don't think you can walk into a hallway and look one way or the other without seeing a hand sanitizer. So they're in the hallways, they're in the libraries, they're in public areas. They're everywhere you need them to keep your hands clean when restrooms aren't available to wash them. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. We have gone through all of the mechanical systems on both campuses. We have increased the level of outside air to the maximum we can. We have exhaust rates cranking to pull the air and purge the buildings. We have enhanced filtration so that we have ASHRAE standard filters being installed across both campuses that are specific for COVID-19 prevention. We're in the process of getting everything up to speed from that regard. We've taken off our energy controls so that all exhaust fans are running 24 hours a day. Even the ones in the bathrooms, we're trying to take off of light switches so that people don't accidentally turn those off. And we're going to open up all the dampers and make sure we're blowing as much air as possible through the buildings to keep the areas as fresh as can be. We've gone through and put classroom furniture. We've taken half of it out for social distancing. All the public seating areas have been socially distanced. We've put markers on the floors where the tables are supposed to be. We've put green dots where you're supposed to sit. So in a classroom, you might sit to the left of the table, and then the other person sits to the left of the table so that we can maintain 6-foot social distancing in all the classrooms. We've done that in the public areas as well. We've noted on the floor, so if the furniture does get moved, we know how to put it back so that we can maintain that at all times. Let's see, we've installed plexiglass shielding at a lot of high transaction areas like you'd see in the grocery store to keep the occupants of those buildings, the users, safe and distant from each other. And we have a full signage program. So when you get out of your car in the parking lot, you're reminded to bring your mask. When you get to the entrance of a building, you're reminded to have a mask on when you enter the building. When you enter the building, there's a health monitor reminder. So you make sure that you're symptom-free before you come into the buildings. And then in the buildings, we put up sanitation reminders and social distancing reminders to help remind yourselves as you go through the building. And I've been wearing a mask for the last month and a half. I keep it in my pocket. When I get out of my office, I put it back on and away you go. You get used to it. I actually was in a meeting with one of the hotel managers the other day, and when I left, I couldn't remember if she had a mask on or not. You just get used to it. You don't remember if it's on or if it's off at certain times, and I would encourage you all, leave it on whenever possible. So if you're having a sip of water and when you're sitting studying, put your mask back on afterwards. It's an easy thing to do, and it's the best practice to get into to keep everybody safe all across campus. It protects you and it protects everybody else. We believe that with all these measures that we've put in place, we have a safe campus. We're looking forward to have you come back, and we welcome the day that you bring the energy back to the campus because it's been lonely here without you.
Thank you, Vice President Tebow. I'm going to keep an eye on the time because we are getting close to 8 o'clock, but what I'd like to do is direct some questions to our two college deans. Dean Millen, I'll start with you, and Dean Perdue, I'm going to prompt you with the questions so you can jump right in when Dean Millen is done. Dean Millen, can you speak to how we will address the students who are in programs that require hands-on learning? So many of those lab sciences, if students do have to return home, how will we address that need? And Dean Perdue, sort of the next extension of that, is for those programs that have licensure requirements, that have specific hours, expectations, how are we dealing with that when students need to return home?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. The lab experiences are going to go as planned. The first thing that we're going to do, though, that might be a little bit different, is we're going to take advantage of the campus. And we've been encouraging many of our classes in the biological sciences, as well as the environmental programs, to treat the campus as their laboratory. So you're going to see a lot of outdoor labs when weather permits. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. But with enhanced PPE and reduced class sizes, students will be in the lab. In some cases, depending on the number of students, they might be in an every other week in the lab, meaning that they would do the actual experiments on week 1, and then on week 2, doing the computational work. That can be done in a different space, but the lab components of our STEM disciplines will carry on as planned. And as folks know, we front-loaded the semester, so we're going to do as much of the engaged and hands-on active learning at the front end of the semester, and then the report writing and the computational work will fill out the back end.
And I appreciate the question about clinical hours and requirements for licensure, because that is absolutely true in quite a few of our health professions. We've done a number of things to ensure that students, to the best of our ability, can graduate on time and sit for licensure as they anticipate and plan. The first thing, though, that I do want to say is that all of this is contingent upon what's happening in the healthcare environment around us. As we learned last spring, when healthcare systems totally shut down, some of our students were indeed excused from the clinical sites because the clinical sites couldn't deal with having students in the environment while they were trying to care for very sick patients. That being said, we have excellent clinical partners. And what many of them did for us over this summer is they expanded clinical hours and gave additional learning opportunities to students. This happened, for example, in our nurse anesthesia program, because you're probably all aware that every operating room in the United States practically shut down for the months of April and May. But when they reopened, They allowed our students not to just be there Monday to Friday, but on Saturday and Sunday as well, because they knew they needed makeup hours. So our students are going to be able to graduate on time. The other fascinating development about the pandemic has been the explosion of virtual simulation. And many companies have come up with interesting products that have allowed students to watch over the internet, or it's a software product, watch a clinical scenario unfold, and then create a plan of care that has an algorithm that the faculty can score in terms of clinical decision-making, appropriateness of planning, care and implementation. And many of our accreditors and board licensing exams are allowing a certain number of those virtual hours to count for clinical hours. So to date, we have not had a single discipline here at the University of New England that has been held up in terms of graduation or licensure. And that's certainly our fervent goal and hope, is that we can keep all students advancing forward so that they're able to complete their studies as they anticipate.
Thank you, Dean Pardue. We've had many questions come in about dining, and so I'll offer a brief statement on dining. As Vice President Tebow mentioned, we've reduced the density of lots of the seating area that we have across campus, and that's included in the dining hall. We've been working diligently with Parkhurst, our dining service provider, and we'll actually have an app that students are able to use through which they will make a reservation to actually have seating in the dining hall. We will also offer lots of to-go options, so students may still access the dining hall to take items away. Some of you have asked about that. We're also increasing the number of to-go items that students can get using their meal swipe for those who are on a meal plan at the various retail locations across campus. For our students that are in the hotel, we've also worked to develop a special meal plan for them, which will allow them to take multiple to-go items at once. For our students who've tried to do that in the past, that wasn't something they could do. Now they can use multiple swipes and take multiple meals. The hotels are outfitted with microwaves and refrigerators. So if a student wants to take, 2 or 3 meals back with them and store those away, they'll have the opportunity to. We'll also share some more information in our FAQ section on the website about dining to ensure that we get through all of these questions. We've also had some additional question about testing, and so I just want to offer a point of clarity. So for those of you who are living in communities where you can in fact get a test, but the test result may take 4 to 7 days to get, please go, have the test taken, quarantine at home, and then bring that result with you to campus. We are trying to be flexible, but in order to make sure that students are negative upon arrival, that's why we're trying to stick to this testing requirement. So we are short on time here. We've got just a few moments left. What I'd like to do is offer President Herbert just a few moments to offer any closing remarks that he has for us. And I will offer that we'll take all of the questions that we've got here in the chat, we'll synthesize them, and this will give us an opportunity to drop additional information into the FAQs on the website. So without further ado, President Herbert.
Thanks so much, Jen. And, I was just sort of glancing at some of the questions coming across, and I wish we had time because I'm sitting here wanting to speak as fast as possible to answer all the questions because they're coming across. These are great questions, but we will get answers to you. I mean, I can't help myself. I have to address a couple of them. One is UNE financially sound and viable? Somebody asked. Absolutely. The question there, I mean, believe me, our bond rating, if you look at the way we've managed this from a fiscal perspective, from a financial perspective, compared to other institutions, we've not seen the layoffs and the big furloughs and the reductions to employee retirement accounts and all that most colleges and universities have done. So we're in a very good place financially. Can you go outside and play Frisbee on campus and the surrounding areas? And so, yes, absolutely. We just ask that you do those things. You wear your mask, you stay 6 feet apart, etc. Jen, I did want to just 2 hours. You have to have a negative test when you show up on campus. But if you can't do it within 72 hours because of getting the results back, plan ahead and get the test, take the test early, right? Take your test early and have that negative result with you, even if it's more than 72 hours. We will be flexible with you on that. We do require you have a negative test when you arrive, But if you can't do it within the 72 hours and it's longer than that because of getting the results back where you live, that's fine as long as you have that negative result back. We will be flexible. And keep in mind, again, we will be testing everyone as soon as you get on campus anyway. So just a couple of things I had to, I couldn't resist addressing, but we will get the other answers to you. And I believe we're going to show on the screen the email addresses of the panelists tonight. So please feel free to email folks. These are their email addresses. Also, the Onward site, the Onward at une.edu is a good place because the person who is monitoring that site is able to triage those messages to the appropriate person. So that's a good one. But if you have a specific question for one of the deans or for Mr. Tebow or any of those folks, then you can email them directly. So thank you all very much for joining us tonight. And again, just as Mr. Tebow and the deans were saying, I miss you guys too, and I really am looking forward to you coming back to campus and us getting back to some version of normalcy. It's not going to be normal. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be great. We're going to have a great time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all. So have a good evening. Bye, everybody.